Hello, welcome to my version, my very first video. Today I'm going to be making flag pillows. Now you might be wondering what's so nerdy about flags. Well, a few things. They're mentioned in The Big Bang Theory with the Fun with Flags with Sheldon Cooper. They're also kind of part of Italia, in which basically every country has their own flag, and therefore every character has their own flag. And it's a great way to show some pride too. Flags are awesome, right? And this way you can make a nice little pillow. So the first thing we need is some fleece. So first of all, you actually want to decide what kind of flag you're going to do. Today, I'm going to do a Canadian flag because I'm Canadian. So you need your fleece, or whatever other fabric you want. I prefer fleece for pillows because it's softer. So I need the red and the white. And then you also need your pattern. So I went ahead and made these. I'll go over the sizes in a second. And then you also need pins and some really good scissors. These ones are brand new. I'm super excited. Alright, so, and then we want to cut 2 of everything. So lay out the fabric, and then we're going to lay out, these are going to be the sides of the flag. And you kind of want to try and set it up so that you're not using too much fabric and wasting too much fabric. You can also do this with felt. The thing is, though, you have to be careful how close you sew to the edge. So I don't really like using felt because it likes to tear on me. So we're going to pin our pattern in place. So I made these 15 inches by 10 inches with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. So when you actually make the pattern, it goes to 11 inches by 16 inches. This flag was a little bit harder to do just because the maple leaf in the middle is obviously a lot bigger than 1/3 of it. So for this one, it is 3.5 inches wide, 10 inches tall for the red parts. For the white parts, it is... Oh, I can't do the math right now. And I didn't write it down because I'm smart. That down. So you'll see here I'm actually just cutting out the pattern. You want to cut out just on the sides of the pattern. You want to be careful also not to use your scissors on the paper. That's going to dull them and you're going to have so many problems cutting things in the future, and then you'll have to sharpen them. You can also get them sharpened professionally, which is kind of expensive. So we're done with the huge part of the red fabric, so you can actually... Another helpful tip, just to have a little garbage can around. Alright, so we've got the sides of both of our sides of flags. So we're done with that pattern. What I like to do when I'm done cutting something out is I like to fold it back up if it came folded, or just if I made it myself then I fold it up after. Just so that I know I don't have to cut it again. Oh, wait a second. I lied. We're not done with the red. For your decoration, you're just going to pin it and cut it out, again, close to the pattern. Try not to cut the actual paper with your scissors again. You can also do this with any sort of pattern. I also made a Japanese flag, you'll see later, with just a circle. Now we're done with the red. I promise. Now, one thing I'm doing here is I'm kind of leaving a little bit of a wide berth here for the stem of the maple leaf, and I will explain why in just a minute. When you're sewing fleece, especially if you're doing it by hand, if you cut it too thin, it's just going to fall right apart. Let's see if I can show you with this. So if you're doing like a little... Oh, you know what, this piece... Oh, no, see, there it is. So it just kind of falls right apart, and you have to be super careful. And I learned that the hard way making a hat for a friend of mine, so I always leave a little bit and then we're just going to sew it along and then cut it out after, so I'll show you that. Alright, so we're done with the maple leaf. So I printed out my maple leaf to about 7 inches, so I figured that was a good size. So maple leaf, red, and now we have the white part. And this one we just need 2 of. Another reminder here again, you want to put your pattern as close as you can to the edges, and if you can line up your edges of your fabric, then all the better. You don't want to waste it as much as possible. You want to waste as little. So, and then when you're cutting, if you're using a large piece of fabric and you're on like a small table or something, it's best to actually cut closer to your pattern first, and then kind of get rid of the large amount of fabric that might be pulling it away from your workspace. And then you just want to cut along the pattern again, avoiding the paper. Done with that pattern. Let's put away fabric for now. So we got 2 white pieces. So let's separate this into 2 flags. So one's going to be the back, one's going to be the front. 2 red, 2 red, and maple leaves. Ooh. Alright, so we're going to do one side at a time. I'm going to take this other side and set it aside. I think I'm saying side too many times. Okay, so first thing we want to do is pin the sides to the flag. So you want to line up your fabric as close as you can to the edge. With fleece, it's a little bit easier to do because it'll actually kind of stick together a little bit. I still prefer to actually leave some pins in though, just because you never know when it might actually get knocked out of the way. Every sewing machine is a little bit different. I'm not going to go into the specifics of my sewing machine. You can probably tell by just the back of it. It's pretty old. It predates spandex by at least 20 years. Probably closer to 30. I've already got it threaded with the red, just because I figured that would be a little bit better. Make sure it's turned on. So on each machine, on the sides of the needle here, on the sides of the foot, you're going to have little marks and numbers. Mine is actually all, for some reason, in numbers. That's how we did it back in the day. My mom's machine actually has like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to line this up with my 4 because that's my 1/2 inch. Your needles down, go ahead and sew forward a few stitches and then go ahead and backstitch. I do this at the end and the beginning of every seam. Use the seam allowance guide as just a guide. Make sure that it stays along that and you'll have a nice clean seam. So now I'm going to steal my thread because we're going to do maple leaf next. I'm going to get rid of my machine. I'm doing the maple leaf by hand. Once your machine is out of your way, go ahead and unpin everything. So this is when we can actually lay the flag out, as you can see there. I also cut off all my excess threads. Lay your maple leaf out and go ahead and start pinning. Now I placed it a little bit too high here, so you're going to see me actually fix it in a second. I prefer a few more pins than a lot of other people that I know. I prefer to have the stability of it staying in place. Do whatever you need to do to get it done. Alright, so that is all pinned. So now we're thread and needle. Here's how to use a needle threader, which I think is the proper name for it. You want to put those little wires just in the middle of the needle and feed the thread through that way. What I'm going to do here is called a back stitch. So you want to start from the back so that your knot is not actually showing on the front. That'll take away from the look of it. You want to feed it through, and then you actually want to go back on your stitch with every stitch. You can actually see here I'm doing a close-up. Each stitch actually goes back over to the other one before it, and then comes back through to the next stitch. You can also do a number of other stitches as well for the outside of a design like this. You can also do like a blanket stitch or any other kind of embroidery stitch. Personally, I prefer the back stitch just because it looks a little bit more like a machine stitched what you're actually sewing. We're going to knot this, and this is a little bit difficult because I didn't leave myself enough thread. Normally what I do is I would loop around and use the needle to actually knot it, but since I didn't do it properly, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to cut the thread just in half, take the needle off, separate both sides, and just knot these a couple times. So we can also take a look at the back of the back stitch here. Here you can actually see the back of the back stitch again. You can actually see how each stitch actually feeds back into the other one. And this is also a little bit closer how to actually use one of those needle threaders. You don't need to use one if you can thread a needle just fine on your own, that's fine. I've been having troubles because of the broken wrist. You can probably guess I don't actually sew this fast. This actually took quite some time to do, so I don't necessarily recommend doing hand stitching if you don't have the time to really put into it. Of course you can sew it by machine, which I just preferred not to do for this particular project. I want to mention the longer that you make your thread for actually sewing, the more problems you're going to get. You're going to see me fighting with a couple stitches here that they keep getting tied up, essentially with each other. So the shorter you make your thread, the better, but you're also going to have to thread your needle a whole lot more. So my camera kind of died. I'm doing this alone, working out the kinks. But I finished the one side of the flag. So now that we're done the one, we want to follow all the exact same steps for the other. This is the point where if you need to go back in the video and follow along with every step, definitely feel free and go for it. I will obviously be here still sewing, or as I am right now, voicing over. So you're going to see the pinning again, you're going to see every actual step, with the one change of I actually did this maple leaf by machine instead of by hand. I'd say in total this entire project took me probably about 8 hours, but there were a few breaks in there. I had to break a couple times when my cameras died, mostly for memory reasons. I also had to, so I ended up having to actually upload them to my computer a little bit earlier than I had initially planned. I also had to run out and bring my mom's car back to her, and run out for a prescription for painkillers for my wrist. As you can tell, it is healing, so that's good. Definitely don't break your wrist, don't jump while you're drunk. Highly recommend not doing that. Also, in case you can't tell by now, I derive great entertainment from myself, my drunken escapades, as well as any kind of mistakes that I make while I do things. So feel free to laugh at me if you're not already. If you are already, don't feel bad because I'm laughing too. So here you're also going to see pivots as well. With the actual machine, you're actually going to see me pivot with each point of the maple leaf. For each pivot, you want to put your needle down, lift the foot up, and twist the fabric underneath to the right angle that you want it. Put the foot back down, sew along that line, and then do the pivot again. So you're going to have to do it a lot on this particular leaf. So if you think that that might not be for you, maybe choose a circle. That might be okay. So you're going to notice here I got into a tad of a fight with my machine. My bobbin actually got stuck, so I had to kind of do an emergency fix, which was a little bit of a pain in the butt because it was a tiny piece of thread that I had to actually use a needle to push against my nail and then pull it out that way. Trim all your excess. You want to make sure that you go ahead and just trim right along the edge of the stitching that you made for the stem, and this is going to avoid any kind of loss of fleece or fabric. So now that we've done both sides, we want to pin them together and sew them together. So So we're going to go ahead and pin.
While I'm pinning here, you're going to see that I actually pin the seams of the white and red parts open. That means that each side is actually going towards itself in terms of color, which is actually a little bit easier to explain with this, which is nice. So the white is going back towards the white, the red is going back towards the red. This actually makes a smoother seam a little bit, and you can also it's a little bit easier to sew as well, especially if you're doing it by machine. There's a lot less material to go through. So here's where you want to mark off the hole that you're going to make. So that's the hole that you're going to use to actually flip this inside out, as well as stuff your flag.
And we're going to line up where we put that line that we're going to leave open. Line up the needle there.
I'm going to go ahead and do a back stitch here as well at the beginning of the hole, just to give it a little bit more stability while you're actually flipping your project as well as stuffing it. It can come undone if you don't do it, so it's a little bit easier in the long run just to do it ahead of time. And then go ahead and sew all the way around. You're also going to see the pivots on each corner. You want each corner to line up with your seam allowance, and then continue on.
So now we're going to flip it inside out. You can stick your hand in there if that's a little bit easier for you, but you just want to get at least one of the corners. Pull that out.
A bigger hole will make this a lot easier, just a heads up.
So then once you have it all flipped inside out, you want to make sure all the corners are nice and out. You can use scissors or any kind of stick for this too. Depending on the size of whatever I'm making, I've used chopsticks. Alright, now we're ready to get rid of the machine. Okay, so now all we have to do is stuff our flag.
Stuff from the corners first, so go into each corner and actually just kind of stuff it a little bit, and then kind of keep going up from there. I like to do the kind of as far back as I can, and then keep going in those lines until I get closer to the front corners. You can also overstuff it, which if you want an overstuffed pillow, you definitely can. The only thing is you might have a little bit of trouble actually sewing it shut, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, especially if this is your first project.
So I'm going to pin it just to kind of hold it in place. Done with that. Pretty happy with that. Okay. So what you want to do first is actually hide the knot. So you want to go as close as you can to where the opening is, and kind of as deep as you can. Push the needle through, and then tuck it all back in there.
What I'm going to do here is called a ladder stitch, and I'm doing it in white just so I can show you a little bit better exactly how it works. What you're going to do is actually sew each stitch into the same side. So you're going to leave it right across from the other stitch, so straight through to the other side, or on the same side. And then actually pull everything through. So before you actually pull it through, it looks a bit like a ladder, which is where the name comes from. So you want to just keep doing that right until you're done with the entire hole. you're done, you just want to clean up your pillow.
And there we go, our very own Canada flag pillow. I also made a few more just to kind of show like what you can do. So you can do three colored flag. I did a German flag here. I also did the bisexual flag. And also did a vertical striped flag. So I did an Italian flag actually for my friend. So I'll give that to her next time I see her. And then I also did another flag for Gay Pride with a little bit of different sort of seam on here. So instead of the seam going under, like what you normally would do, so I did that on one side, I actually went over on the one color and then put the other one underneath. So it kind of gives that little look to it. I was hoping the thread would show more, but it doesn't. And there you have it. Oh, I also made one more. This one I didn't want to do on camera because it was just seemed too easy. Glad I did the maple leaf. So you can use these for all kinds of things. You can add them to your costumes just for comfort, especially if you're at a convention and you need a place to sit. Go ahead, throw that on the floor and sit on it. Or if you need essentially a little pillow to put your head on while you're sitting on a bench at a convention, anything like that. And you can also match it to go with your costumes as well. Totally open to interpretation at that point. That's it for today. Join me next time. I will be making bags. One of them I will be actually using for cosplay this year. Super excited about that. I'm gonna put my brace back on. Don't forget to subscribe if you have any other questions or have any suggestions for me of what to make. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, or on Facebook. And links will be in the bottom. Have a good night. Bye.
I'm gonna throw in another thank you here. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have any suggestions as well, go for it. And thanks again. Have a good night.